All right, evening everyone. A little bit of a wait for a video from me for a while, but it's because I've been working on this and it's taken a bit of a while. So slightly different in terms of presentation tonight. So I've got a video that's going to run through how you take a third-person character model that you've done Blender or wherever, and then how you rig it using Mixamo, and then how you drop it into Unity, and how you add code and an animator to it to make it run and animate and be controlled as a third-person character in Unity. So request from Marius and Alfie and their group initially, so I'm using their model just to run through things and to go through the code that I've got. Now, some of you have played around and used this already, kind of individually, but just so that you've got it on video broken down so that you know the different stages. So I've done this slightly differently. So I've done this already. So I've done this afternoon and I've spliced it together, and it's quite a long one. It's going to go through, you'll see the timestamp on this video is probably about 45-50 minutes long. But it's going to run through everything, so you'll be able to take it in stages and obviously pause it, go back, run through things, and I'll go over everything that we need to. All right, so I am taking it as read that you have a model that you've made either in Blender and is in a T-pose, or that you've sourced somewhere and you're using as your main character. Okay, you'll need that as an FBX ideally, so that you can upload it and use it in Mixamo. Now with Mixamo, all you need is an Adobe ID, which is free, but you can't use your college email address to sign up. You'll just need a separate one to log in for. But I think a number of you have got your own ones anyway. And like I say, it's free. It's just so that you've got the ID to log into it as you go through. All right, so we're going to jump to the video, and I'll disappear off into the corner, and hopefully I'll be able to keep up with myself, and if not, then I'll have to pause it and we'll go from there. All right, so and we're running. Okay, so with Mixamo, so sign in, log in, and put it out. You've got the address there, just mixamo.com, and you can see there that you'll need an FBX or an OBJ to log in. Upload your character and click onto there, and then go find it and upload it, and it shouldn't take too long. This was quite a speedy one for this example, which was quite handy. Once it's in, you'll get a bit of a preview, and then you can just go through, and then you've got these placeholders where you need to push through and place the chin, the wrists, the elbows, the knees and the groin, and it is literally, because it's symmetrical, you just pull one across and put it into the place where you think is best suited for that joint, and then go from there. Okay, it's no more complicated than that as you go through. If you've got a slightly different character, then think carefully about where you're going to put things, and think carefully about where you're going to place it. The groin is a key one, because obviously with the bend in the middle of the body, you need to think carefully about where that's going to go. Once you're done, click on next, and it will auto rig it for you. Now it can take a while depending on your computer, depending on your internet connection and all of that, and especially at the moment, so it might chug for a little bit. This one didn't take too long for me. I don't think it even took 2 minutes, so I won't need to fill in the time too much, he says. Fingers crossed. But it does save you a lot of work. Yes, you can rig things in Blender and you can put it across, but this saves you a hell of a lot of work as you go through. All right, and then you'll get a little review. So this wasn't perfect. You can see the feet are clipping a little bit down the bottom there and kind of sinking slightly into the floor a bit, but it's not the end of the world, and for this example it's absolutely fine. Marius, Alfie and the rest of you, you might want to have a look at your model as you go through, but once you're happy you can click through and you'll come back to this page, and you can see it's placed the model in. Don't worry that it looks like it's sunk, it's going to be fine. So what we need now is an animation, and we're going to do the whole kind of gambit of animations of this, but first of all we just need an idle. So you can see there, click onto animations at the top, do a fairly kind of generic search, and you'll get what you need, and then you'll get a preview of what we're looking at, and you can pan around, and you've got different options down there on the left hand side of that screen where you can do some different views and different looks. Once you're ready and good to go, you can download, and you've got a couple of options here. Make sure you choose FBX for Unity so that you've got all that you need for bringing it into Unity. And for this one, we want it with the skin. So you want the whole model and you want the whole rigging to go with it. Okay. Once you're happy, download, and it shouldn't take too long to download. This was quite a small model in terms of file size, which is quite handy as it goes through. All right. So that's downloaded, and then you've got that saved somewhere. So it's just in my downloads folder at the moment. Obviously, kind of put it somewhere safe so that you've got the original file. All right. So you won't see me show that in folder. Oh, yes, you will, because I bought it across. There you go. All right. So we'll look a little bit like that. And you can tell it's worked because you've got that at idle at the end. So it's bringing that animation with it. So it will kind of differentiate when you've got different animations so that you can see which is which. All right. This is just a really simple Unity scene that I set up. I've got a random Black Knight that I was playing around with in there before, but I've just got a plane in there and just the main camera, and that's it. And I'm just dragging in the model now, and you'll see there he is, just sitting there, kind of ready to go. All right. So this is in my test build at the moment. So I will flick in between the test build where I've got more done and back to this screen so that you can see where we're going with it. And I'll use examples from that scene that I've already built, just to kind of reference what we're doing and what we're looking at. Okay, so don't worry too much if we suddenly jump to a different one. All right, so I'm just going to go in and have a look at this. So into my scene there, find my model that I've already done, because what I've done with this model here is exactly the same as what we are going to do with our Black Knight model that we've just rigged. Okay, so just having a quick look, and you'll see there in the inspector with this one, I've got a few components on there. So I've got it tagged as player. We've got an animator. Be careful, it's an animator, not an animation. We've got a rigid body, and we've got a capsule collider on there that we are going to use. And I cannot remember what I was looking for here. Oh, I was just checking something for when you bring the model in, but I know what it is. So it's all right. It's just me floundering around for a while. I'll find it on the next folder. I'm pretty sure I will do. Looking characters, there it is. There we go. All right, so that's what your models will look like. And I was just checking if we needed to change anything on the animation type. You'll see it's set there to generic. You've got humanoid under there and a couple of other options, but we just need it left on generic. It's absolutely fine. It will work that way. So like I was saying, you've got animator there, you've got a rigid body, a capsule collider, and we've got the move script, which we are going to write ourselves today. I've got a few other scripts on there that are referencing other things that we don't need to worry about today. You can see what they are. One runs an infantry, one runs a shooting script, and one runs player damage. So what I did with this, just because I'm referencing something else, and you can do this as well with the video, is I just took a screenshot of that top half there so that you can see the options that I've got. So just go into snippet and grabbed it there while the video is it. You won't need to do that obviously, because you can pause this video and have that up on screen and reference back to it at the moment. But it just meant that when I was doing my demo earlier, it kind of allowed me to see the options all in one go, which was very handy. So that's just off screen now, and we should hopefully start disappearing back to our third person test level. There we go. All right. Remember, if you get lost when you go in, double click and you'll go and zoom to that object as you go through. So I've just got a plane in here at the moment, and I'm just going to drop in the model as we've got there. You'll see that it's got a camera on it. So you can delete that out, or you could just select it and you can turn it off. It will do exactly the same job for what we need to do. And then I brought the main camera in as a child of our knight that's running through Unity rather than one that's just brought in from Blender, and just positioned it roughly in the right position, kind of behind his head, so that we can see the model as we want to in the game. Right, and with that sorted, we can start having a little look at some of the elements that we need in. So the animator should already be there, and you can see there that it's referencing the avatar that we've got with our Black Knight model already. The controller we haven't put in yet. So we can add component and rigid body, and we don't need to change anything there. I already know that I make a mistake at this point, but we'll come to that later. It's the wonders of hindsight, having already done this. We'll add our capsule collider, I think was the next one, which we actually don't need for this from memory, but it's just good to have it in there right now, because it just means if we do need it to trigger into anything or to touch anything, then we can. So just click on the edit collider there, and I just, with the handles on the little green handle dots on there, just pulled it out. So it's roughly, that doesn't need to be the whole size of your model at the moment, just roughly kind of its torso and its height, so that you've got a little bit of sense of depth and collisions around your character. The script we obviously can't add yet. I'm floundering at the moment because I'm trying to think how I can add the script, and we haven't written it yet on this one. So again, just bear with me. But you'll add the script on there as well. So we'll add the move script later once we've written it. Okay, so good point to save your scene at the moment, so that we've got all of that safe in this setup and ready to go. So the animator doesn't have a controller, and that's what we need to put in first. And we're going to use our right. Apologies, sorry, that might have just jumped cut because I just had to pause it briefly. So we are up to looking at the animator. So let's carry on our video. So we're just going to jump and have a look at the example of the other one, like I was saying. So there's our animator controller. All right, and I'm just going to now go and try and find it. Give me a couple of seconds because I go in the wrong place. All right, so you can see the controller, and you'll remember that we used this when we did the door, and all this is exactly the same, just a bit more elaborate. So we are calling different animations at different times, and the script will tell us how to do that. And we've got these different spider grounds. So the one in the middle there is an idle, and then we've got a walk, a run, a jump that are coming off of it, and the two towards the bottom is a melee and a shoot, and they link all together in different ways through different transitions, and we're going to go through and put that together now. So we've already got one animation in our setup, so we've already got the idle. We brought that across when we rigged our model, and we brought the idle animation across itself. So to make a new animator for this, right click in your assets folder, go to create, and we are looking for animator controller. All right, be careful, there's a couple of animation ones in there. We want the animator controller, and give it a name that is appropriate. So I think I call this Black Knight something. Black Knight anim, probably. Oh no, Black Knight controller, there you go. And then once you've got it, double click on it, and it will take you into the workspace that we're going to use. So just before you do that, so one thing I have a habit of doing, and it may not be necessary, but I just have a habit of doing it. So there is our animation, that little idle kind of item, and what I do is I Control D and duplicate that, so that I've always got a master animation that came with the model or came with the download safe somewhere, and I'll work with the duplicate. So I've just duplicated that idle. You can see it's sitting there in the assets window, and we're going to use that one, and I'm going to make a folder for all of the animations because we're going to download some more animations in a little bit later on. All right, so there's my BK anim folder. We're going to reference that a fair bit, and my idle animation that's sitting in there. Okay, and just showing you how I've got the others set up for the other character in my other scene. All right, so with our idle animation, because when we're just standing there waiting for time, we want it to loop. Okay, and this is where you set that loop. Okay, so you see loop time there, it's checked off. Just check on that, and that animation now, when we call it, will loop unless we tell it different. Okay, which in this case we're not going to. We're just going to let it loop video idle. All right, so double click into your animation controller, animator controller, sorry, and you've got different places on there. So right click, create state and empty, and you will get this new state that we're going to start with. All right, and entry and new state. So as soon as it comes in, it's going to go to this first state, and we want it to go to idle. So we want it to default to go to the idle animation initially. So label it up like I just have there in the inspector, and now we're going to look for the idle animation that we've got. Now, I stupidly didn't realise that I was doing this off screen. You will get a little window. I'm just going to pause the video. You'll get a little window pop up with all of your animations in. Now, the key thing to remember is to find the right animation, because you may have more than one model in your scene, like I have. We'll see it again later. I will remind you of this again later. But at this point, I forgot that I was off screen. I've got a dual screen set up here, and I hadn't realised I wasn't recording it. Okay, but that's the reason we create that animation, that BK anim folder, so that you can put all of your animations in there, and you're always going back to that same folder, so you know where to look for it, and you can see the path when you're looking for the animations. So where's my current mouse? There it is. All right, so we've just searched for that animation in here, and you can see now that I've labeled it up idle, but this is the idle animation that we've called. All right. So on entry, it will go to that idle animation, and we can now, I think if we select on our Black Knight in the scene, we can populate the animator with the animator controller. All right, so we can drag and drop, or you can go through and select it. So again, I did it on a little window which you can't see. Okay, but you can see now that here the controller is in there. And if I'm right in remembering, we play the scene, and not much will happen, but we will go from a normal state, and we will see the idle animation play through. So you see that it's just got a little bit of movement in him while he's waiting. Okay, so we know our animation is working, we know our controller is working, and we've got our camera in place, as you can see we set up before. Okay, so not very exciting, but we're on the way. We've got one animation in, and now we need to start thinking about how we're going to pull all of the other animations together and get those ready to go. Right, so a bit of a jump cut, so I went into the wrong folder. So what we're going to do now is we are going to populate this folder with some other animations. So we're going to go back to Mixamo, and we're going to get a few animations. First one we're going to find is a walking animation. So up in your search bar, type in walk, find something that's appropriate. I went for all very bog standard ones in here. Now the thing to watch with walking and running ones, you'll see that it will default to walking kind of a distance. We don't want it to do that. We're going to do that. So you need to check on this in place box there. And now you'll see he's walking on the spot. All right. You'll have the same when it comes to running. So it needs to be running on the spot, because we are going to do all of the movement. We don't want it jumping kind of a couple of inches. Now, thing to remember is we don't need the skin here. FBX for Unity again when we're downloading, but this time without the skin. We don't need the model. We've already got it. We don't need to download it twice. It'll make your download smaller. It will make everything run a bit quicker as well. All right. So that will go into wherever your downloads goes, and then again, I might show this in a folder that's off screen. I can't remember if I dragged it across. Doesn't look like I did. All right, but we just drag that animation in, and you see where it comes in slightly differently. But again, open it up, duplicate the animation so that you've got a master there in the prefab, and we will use the duplication that we get. All right, so back to Mixamo. This time we're looking for running. Again, find something that's appropriate, find something that works for you. Mine were all very boring, I'm afraid. Again with the running, so in place, so he's running on the spot. And you can see our model's working quite nicely, so it's not perfect, but it's working quite nicely. Again, without the skin, FBX for Unity, download it, and we're going to populate it into that folder. So drag it in. One of these I lose, so I might flounder for a little bit because it takes me a while to find it. Oh, it is this one, I think. Because I mistakenly opened it in something random. But I get there, promise you. But it's the same process. So bring it in. There's your prefab. Open it up. There you go, running. Duplicate it. just so that you've got it separate, so that you've got the master and then you've got the working file that we're going to use, and so on and so forth. So then I'm looking for a jump, and we're going to do a jump control on here. This is just a jump on the spot. With jump, you can play around with things a little bit because you can get jumps. You'll see some of the ones that I go through before I find one. You might be jumping off of something, you might be jumping onto something, you might be jumping kind of a little bit of distance included as well. And sometimes you can include that in the animation, as you can see on some of the examples here. And when you play around with it, there's all manner of examples on mixer mode that you can use. All right. I just wanted a standard jump. And don't worry, you see that I select one that's got a character's model on there already. It doesn't matter because we're not taking the skin, we're just taking the animation. It's absolutely fine. As long as it's working in your preview window with your model, you can take it and you can use it. All right, because I think I used a standing jump for this guy, and I'm actually going to bring in a melee as well. So I'm going to bring a melee attack just so that we can get the animation working. I'm not going to go into anything about the damage or kind of weapons or anything like that. But there you go. You can see that kind of right hand swipe that we've got on there. Again, download it without the skin, and we'll drag those and populate those into our folder on Unity so that we've got them ready to go. So one thing I do here is when I duplicate these ones, because this has got, I think it says standing jump and standing melee if I remember rightly, I just renamed them to jump and melee so that they're easier to spot. We've got the masters, so if we ever want to go back and get the originals, we can. But for this, it doesn't matter. We just need it kind of nice and bog standard for what we need. So duplicate them all, label them up so that you've got them right, and then they're good to go and ready to use as we start populating our controller. So I've renamed melee there, and I'm just going to rename jump as well, and then we can go back and have a look at our controller if I remember rightly. So we've got idle, jump, melee, running and walking. Alright, so that's our one that we've already done. We're going to go into our new one. So we're going to start with idle. We've already got idle in there, and we're going to populate this with a few different bits and bobs. So you can see there with my one, we've got some different elements on there. So we've got running up at the top left, I've got walk just above the idle, and I've got jump. And we are effectively going to recreate this with the Black Knight. So from our entry we go into idle, and then from idle we want to be able to walk, or we might be able to want to run or jump from any of those. And then the melee attack we want to be able to do from any state. So from any animation that we're in, we want to deliver the melee attack. So if you're kind of walking along and the Sonic jumps you, you want to be able to kind of do your melee attack. And you'll see on the right hand side of the inspector that we've got different options as we go into an animation and out of an animation. We'll come back to whether or not they've got exit times a little bit later. And then on the left hand side here we've got our parameters. We're going to use two main parameters. We're going to use a boolean and we're going to use some triggers. So booleans for our walk and our runs, and triggers for our jumps and our melee. So continuous things, we're going to use our boolean. For our one-offs, so you're going to jump once or you're trigger the melee once, we're going to use the triggers. So when we run here, right click and create state and go to empty, and we'll name this one up walking. And I think I position them all first. Yeah, so we're going to do some transitions here. You remember the white arrows from the example one that I've shown you before. I'm going to show you how to do that, but we're just going to position these first out. So bring in another one. This one's going to be jump. So label it up appropriately. And this one will be running. So right click, create new state and empty, and then change the name of it in the inspector. And we need one more for melee. And I'm just going to move any state just underneath here, just so it's slightly more organized. I just prefer them to be down here. But again, create new state, empty, and this one's melee. So we now need to start populating these with some animations, which we've got. So nice and easy. Choose the state that we want, and this one is walking. I hope at this point I bring the window across. I think it's this point I remember, and you'll be able to see it. No, it's not this one. All right, so but hopefully you saw there that I am just populated that one with walking. So just remember to get the right animations, like I was saying. There we go. That's where I remember it. All right. So you can see there, just at the bottom there, that you've got the path. So if you've made that folder and you put all of your animations into a folder that you know the name of, then when you're looking for them, you can see all the animations that I've got on this one. You can find it nice and easy. So we're going to show you what I mean for jump. So go looking for jump, scroll down in your window, and there's a few there. But we just scroll down till we find that folder, BK Anims. We know that that's the one that we want. Double click and it populates there. Same for running. Scroll down, find your running animation. First one this time. There's the folder, check the path, double click, away you go. And last but by no means least, melee. Same way. Find melee. Not that one. This one. There it is, double click. Alright, so that's all of our animations in. So we've got our states of our animations and we've got the actual animations loaded into those states. So when we link these together and then when we later on call them in the script, they will play the right things. So this time we're going to right click on the idle and choose make a transition. And this allows us to go from one state to another. So we're going to go from idle to walking and then from walking to idle. So right click on walking and come back. Alright, and then we're going to do right click on idle, make transition, go to running, and then right click on running, make transition, come back to idle. Okay, so I'm just going to pause this because I'll run through it quite quickly. So remember, we're doing this because from your idle position, if you press the right button, you're going to start walking. But then if you let that button go, you're going to go back to idle, as long as you don't press anything else. So you need your animations to be able to transition from one to another, which is why we're doing from idle into walking and then from walking into idle. Okay, likewise for running. I'll carry on the video and it will play through the rest of them as I do it. All right, so from idle, make transition, up to jump, you're right clicking on these transitions to get this, make transition and back to idle. Now we also need to consider from not only from idle but from other animations as well. So any state, exactly the same, kind of right click, make transition, we're going to go to melee so that we, whatever state we're in, whatever animation in, we can press a button and we'll do our melee attack. But we also need to consider that if we are running or walking, that we might need to go through. So if we're running, for instance, I can't remember what one I did, we might go from a run to a jump. So we need to be able to transition from that animation to there. All right. Likewise, we might be walking and we might go to a jump. So right click from walking to jump and then from jump to walking. So it's getting quite complicated, but it is fairly common sense, okay, as you go through. Basically all we're doing is whatever state, whatever animation we're in, we want a route to one of the other animations. Okay, and last but I know I think there's one more that I realise in a minute. Okay, but we go from walking to running and running to walking. Okay, so we've just linked them at the moment. We've not set the behaviours into place yet. We're going to do those next, but we'll just go through and I think I'll just go through and I'll just check the previous one that I did. So there you go. So you see that top half is very, very similar now to what we've got set up. We've got a few other bits to do. You see just on the left hand side there, I've got some parameters in place already. We're going to put those in to our controller on the Black Knight next. And then as we go through, you'll see that there's some different transitions, and these transitions have conditions to missions. All right, and they link to the parameters that are there on the left. Okay, so there's a lot to take in at the moment. It will be a lot easier when I go through it and plan it out. And like I say, you can pause this, you can slow it down, and you can see the differences that they make. All right, so you'll see that some have a condition and some don't. It depends on what you're doing and how you're coming out of it. But I will go through that in a moment. So one thing that we did miss is that we need to, from our melee, we need to go back to an animation which we didn't put into place. So we need to go back to an idle. So once we've done our melee attack, we need to go back to idle, which is what we're going to do now. So just from melee, right click, make transition, and back to idle, just so that we've got that in place as well. Okay, and that's all we need. We haven't got everything else that I've got on the other one. There's a few other bits that I had on the other one. All right, but now we need to add in our parameters. So you see the little plus that I just hit on there. Select a Boolean and type in movement. Be careful what you type here, because you're going to use these in the script. So whatever you type here has to be exact and correct, because you're going to reference these in the script later. So 2 Booleans, one for movement and one for running. Realize it says movement, not walking. Okay. And then 2 triggers, one for jump, one for melee. So just pause that. So 2 parameters that are booleans, movement and running, and 2 parameters that are triggers, jump and melee. Okay, make sure you get them the right way around, because we need them to work properly. Okay, so just selecting on that transition that I've got there, you can see that we can, when we've got going through, it's picked up a condition already. So it's picked up that there's a condition in there for movement. All right, so when we're going from idle to walking, we want movement to be true. When we're going from walking to idle, we want movement to be false. And you just set them in that drop down here. So from idle to running, we add a condition. This time we're going to change it to running, and we want that to be true. So from idle to running is true, and from running to idle, we're going to set the condition running, and we're going to make it false. So if we're going to the animation, it's setting it to true, so it plays the animation. If it's coming back to idle, then it sets it to false. So with jump, this is a little bit different. So we set jump and we've got no condition. This is because it's a trigger. Okay, so on the return, we just need to leave the conditions. We don't need to worry about it. All right, and I'll come on to why a little bit later. Okay, so from walking, we're going to go to jump. So condition, set jump. That's all we need to do there. We don't need to do anything on the return. We can just leave that as it is. We don't need to set a condition. So from walking to running, we need to set running to true. And then on the return, from running to walking, we need to set running to false. All right, so these are booleans, so they need to be either true or false. All right, they need conditions on both ways. Running to jump, set the condition, set it to jump. On a return, we don't need to do anything. So from any state to melee, we need to set our melee trigger. And then from melee to idle, we don't need to do anything. Did I do them all? I can't remember if I did idle to running. I must have done. Right, so what I'm doing here is I'm just checking some of the options in here. So you can see you've got some of the clips of the animations that you can play around with. You've got some other options in there. I'm not going to go into that in this one. This is just to get your bog standard. But what we're looking at here for the triggers is our exit time. So the trigger animations have an exit time. It will play the animation, it will get to the end of the animation, and then it will have an exit time where it will automatically return to the transition that it's linked up in. All right, and we don't want to interrupt that. So it's going to play the animation through, and it's going to find that it's got an exit time and play it back. Okay. And you'll see the ones with the booleans, they don't have an exit time, because we want to be able to stop those immediately. So if you're walking, you want to be able to kind of change immediately to either idle or running. All right. So we're going to run through and we're going to set that on our one now. So where do we start? So from jump to idle, we need it to have an exit time. From idle to jump, no exit time. Okay, we need to play it through. So it's on the return from your triggers. Okay. Your booleans, take off the exit times. We don't want exit times on those. So do it for walking, do it for running, and then make sure you do it from walking to running as well, on both. So from running to jumping, take off the exit time, but on the return from jumping to running, leave the exit time on. Same with walking. Leave the exit time on the return from jumping to walking. Oh, and leave it on the leave the exit time on checked between melee and idle. Okay, so that is our animator controller set up and ready to go. All right, so save where you're up to now. Remember, those parameters, how we've labelled them up there, need to be spot on, and you need to remember what they're labelled because we're going to reference them in the script as we come to that, which I think we do next, if I remember rightly. So, right click and create C# script. I'm going to call this, what did I call it? Movement night. So remember, whatever you call it here needs to be what it's labelled up as in the public class when you come to it. One was a bit of a pain in the neck and didn't open up initially, but we get there in the end. Okay, so I am going to cheat a little bit on here. You are not going to be able to. So at different points here, you'll want to pause the video and go through. You can see that I've got my old one on another tab. So I'm going to copy and paste because I've typed this up already once and I don't need to do it again, but you do. All right, but we're going to run through the different elements of what we're looking at. Okay, so just add in a public class, just make sure that yours is the same as what you've called your C# script, obviously. And then we are going to take across our first lot of lines of code. So just wait until I space it out. So what I've tried to do is keep the tags in so that you can see what is going on and what we're doing. So drop them in just under your public class. First of all, private animator, player anim. So we're going to call the animator at the start. So we're going to reference the animator controller that we've just made. So the script knows that it's talking to that animator controller. That's what that line is. So private animator, player underscore anim. Semicolon. All right. We've got two variables in here for our movement and our rotation. The movement speed at the moment equals 5. Okay, that's key because we're going to reference that later for our running script as well. So we're going to change that, and it's going to be a statement that we look at when we're changing from walking to running. And we've got our rotation speed in there as well, how quickly we're turning around and looking things. And then we've just got a public checking to see whether or not we're grounded, and we've got a reference of our rigid body, just change that to RB. All right, so that is our first lines of script that we are calling. So before we put in any void at the moment, those are the items that we are calling at the top of our script. Okay, so make sure you've got those in. I would put the labels in as well. Okay, so go through and put the labels in at the same time as I am. So slightly different. We've got a void awake and a void start. Now I haven't tested or not whether or not you could do these both under void start, but when I was researching it and putting this together, the bits and pieces that I found that worked had this as two different bits. So just get rid of the void start, so I haven't got a double. So void awake, we're calling that component. So player anim equals the animator. Okay, so the rest of the script knows that when I'm saying player anim, it's talking about the animator controller, and equally when I'm saying RB, we're talking about the rigid body. And you remember we've got those two components on our model already. So those are the references that we are putting across. All right. Where do we start with? Oh, we start with a jump. Okay, so we're going to put across our jump script, which is a on collision enter void. So, oh no, sorry, I thought I'd pause it then. So, the interesting thing about this script is that I'm not 100% sure why it's working. All right, so technically the script is saying on collision, if you collide with a game object and the tag is ground, and grounded is false, then make grounded true. So it's just kind of pushing that option to jump, and it should have a tag check in there. Now, because I cobbled this together from a few different bits and pieces, for whatever reason, and I go and try and work it out right now, so I'm just going to go back and check the floor of my other level. Essentially what that script is saying is kind of when you're on the floor, it's registering that you've grounded yourself, and you tag your terrain or you tag your floor, so it can do so. But when I check this, my ground isn't tagged as ground. So I'm not entirely sure why it's working and why it's not working, but it will be fine, as you will see later. But it just flummoxed me a little bit, and at some point I will work out what's going on, but I'm not entirely sure why that happened. So we will just scrub along a little bit. I don't want to go too far because I'll jump, so I think we'll just fill time and I'll have another drink. Right, we're back. Okay, so back into our script. I couldn't work it out. So we're just going to take this in. You can see that I've got a double jump if you kind of pause it when I'm copying from the move script. But we're just going to do the single jump at the moment. So we drop that in. So just to go through that script again. So void on collision enter, collision call. If you're colliding with a game object and its tag is equal to ground and grounded equals false, you'll see there that we kind of call it over here. Then make grounded true. Okay, and we will reference that later on with our animations, so that we play the animation at the right time to give us a bit of force, and we're going to put a little bit more detail into that as we go through. Right, next bit. So we're now going to look at what we're calling into our updates, and I just changed the order of this a little bit, I think, initially. So, and again, I've tagged them all up so that you can see which is which. So movement, I take across. I don't know why I called it movement and not walking. You could do, as long as you call it the same all the way through. It doesn't really matter. I just, for some reason, had it labelled up as movement in here. And what we're doing here is we're using the horizontal and vertical inputs that are already in place for our forward, back, left and right. Okay, so we're not breaking them down, we're just having it as horizontal and vertical, and we've got our transform rotate on the horizontal, so that's our rotation speed when we're moving around left to right. And if you remember, we've called our rotation speed at the top of the script, it was 200. All right, you'll be able to see that in the inspector when we put the script on, so you can change it and alter it as you go. And our vertical is referencing our movement speed. Okay, so that's our movement. That's your walking, essentially. Now, your run is under an if statement. And it just takes me a second because I failed to realise that I've got an extra parentheses in there that I don't need. But while I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing, this is an if statement. So what we're going to do is say if we're holding down left shift button, we're going to implement run. Okay, and at the moment we're not calling the animation, we're just calling the process. So you'll see there, if the input get key code left shift is down, movement speed equals 10, else movement speed equals 5. So the 5 we set at the start, so that's your normal walking speed, and that's what's referencing in our movement up here. Okay, but if we've got hold down shift, then we're going to double that and we're going to increase our speed to 10. So while shift is held down, double the speed. That's when later on when we call the animations in this same script, we'll be able to we'll use that 10 as a reference. Okay, so just be careful there. Input.get key. Oh, I've just going through and explaining what I said. Key code and left shift. Okay, remember your double brackets just there. All right, slow this down when you're going through it. All right, so just pause it, listen to me go through it once, and then come back and have a little look around. All right, so I think I've got 2 lots of jump commands in here, and I only need 1. So this one is again an if statement. So this time, if input get key down code is the spacebar and we are grounded, so if we're on the ground, which is maybe where that reference comes in. I'm still not 100% sure how it's working, but anyway, this time we're going to add force. So we're going to add force, and we are going to move our model up, and grounded equals false until we come back down again. Okay. So this time, this is where we add the force to push our actual object up as well as play the animation. All right. Right, so animations. So we've called all of our commands, and now separately we are going to link our animations, which is a bunch of if statements which run along a theme, and kind of once you see one, you'll see the others kind of coming into play. So drop these in. Hopefully you can still see the labels on there. So this time, if our input is horizontal or vertical, we set our movement to true. All right, so it's calling the boolean in our animator controller, and it's calling movement. So you remember when we set the boolean in the animator controller and we called it movement, that's now what it's calling. So it's setting that to true. I'm just going to go and show you so you remember. All right, so it's calling this. All right, so when horizontal and vertical inputs are there, it's playing those animations through. Okay, copy and paste the run. Run is virtually exactly the same. There is one difference. Okay, so this time, if movement speed equals 10f, so it's looking at that as your question, your if statement. Okay, if you've got that shift held down and it's changed the speed to 10, then changed the animation to running. All right, set that to true. Again, making sure it's exactly the same as you've labeled it up in the animator controller. They've got a link because now they're going to be talking to each other. So they've got to be spelt the same, capitals, lowercase, everything. Okay, so make sure you've got them in line. And then I think I'll take the last two together. These ones are slightly smaller, but they run along the same theme. So again, if statement, this time, depending on the key that is pressed, we're going to play the trigger of the animation. So you'll see we haven't got an else on this. It's just kind of, if this is pressed, do this. So if input get key down, so if our spacebar is pressed, play around him, set trigger. So I've got this labeled up as jump 1 in my old code, so I didn't do that in here, so I've got to make sure it's labeled up. So change that to jump, and I'll just kind of highlight where it's called jump in here. And that's a trigger this time, remember, not a boolean, so we don't need the else in the if statement. And then we come back and have a look at melee. I've just set it to the key code G. Okay, you can set it to whatever key you want. I just had it on G. Okay, and that is it. So we then just need to work out how many parentheses I need. I think I need 3 from memory. I think I try and second guess myself. I think I only need 2, which is complete falsehood, and I need to put 2 more in. But I'll get there in a minute. Come on, put 1 more in. And there we go. All right. Save your script, and that is us done with the script. So there's a lot of information going on there, and I haven't gone into detail in the script because I'm more kind of keen for you to get this working and get this running. So you've got it there. There's a few things in there. Kind of a double line means or when you look at the some bits. Sometimes you need kind of equals in there to when you're checking something. 2 ampersand ands when you're kind of saying this and this needs to happen. But hopefully you've got a sense of how some of those if statements are working together within this one bit of movement script, with the controls along with the animations, and then tying in with your animator controller as long as you've got them all labelled up right, as long as you've all got them kind of in sync. So make sure you're checking your spellings and your capital letters and bits and pieces like that to make sure you haven't got any issues there, and then you should be okay. Watch for things like double brackets and bits and pieces like that when you're doing your own. But what we're going to do now is we are going to go back to our model in our scene, and we had the main components on there. So we've got our animator, we've got our rigid body, we've got our catch glider, which we don't really need at the moment. I don't think off the top of my head, but I might be wrong. But now we can add our script. So drag and drop your script on, and you will see that we've got that movement speed and that rotation speed as public, so that we can change those, and that is grounded as just a check reference so that you can see it in the inspector as well. So now when we play, you'll see that we've got our idle and our walk animation is there. So I'm just moving backwards and forwards, left and right at the moment. You'll see it starts just to hold there. So it's walking for a minute. Our melee's working as well, so it's quite nice. It works quite well with this model, and our jump is working nicely as well. All right. So I didn't test the run because I didn't have enough space, so I just made the plane a little bit longer so that I could see if the run was working. And this is fun because this is where we see what mistakes I've made. All right. So running works okay, but it's getting stuck. So we're running through an animation, and if you've worked out what I've done already, kudos to you. And then for some reason I'm falling through the floor and I'm flat on my face. Okay, so I immediately know what I've done, or actually I immediately know what I haven't done, but I do go and check, I think, if I remember rightly. So I just go back and double check with my example. Save the scene first. So very quickly, just checking the constraints on the rigid body, and you will see that my rotation are all locked. Okay, because I'm running that through the script, so I don't need the rigid body to do anything more for me. I just need it to be on there. So that's all I need to do. So into the rigid body, into your constraints, freeze the rotation on X, Y, and Z, and you will be fine. Okay, so this will now not fall into the floor, but the animations aren't working. They're working, but they stop. Please tell me you've worked it out by now. All right. So you remember, idle, we clicked on and we set to loop. Jump, we don't need to. It's only playing it once, so leave that as it is. Same with melee, you don't need that to loop. But running and walking need to loop, which is what I'd forgotten to do. So set those onto loop as I've just done in the video there, and then that is you done. Okay, we'll play it through and we'll just double check that we're running and we're fine. There you go, there's our run, and you can see now it's kind of got it in place, and the jump and the trigger will kind of play as you press them, because we've got them with that trigger element on it, so that it just comes in when we need them. So there you go, third person character with some animations all up and running, with some nicely supplied examples from Marius and Alfie, everyone else. So yes, there's a lot in this video, and there's a lot that we've gone through, and we've run through quite a long piece of script there, and I've buzzed through that. So take your time with that. Go through it slowly, go through it bit by bit. The labels are there to help you, so that you know what you're kind of looking at. But you've got a number of elements, they're all coming together, and we've done it all together already in the door animation sequence that we did in lesson a little while back. And this is an extension of that. The script is far more detailed, yes, but essentially it is doing the same thing. When we press a certain button, it's calling a certain animation, and it's using the animator controller to do that. That's no different to what you're doing. I'm just going to come off of this because my video's run out. So you're doing exactly the same with that, and running through that just in a slightly more complicated way. So take your time. Remember to think about how we used mixer mode to rig it initially, and then we've used that to put our animations into place. So skinned for the first one, no skin for the following ones, so that you've got quicker downloads and you don't need that extra information. When you go back through the video, think about how I've organised things. It may not be how you normally do things, but it does help knowing what folder they're in and knowing how to reference and making sure that you keep a master copy safe and that you use the duplications that I showed you how to do. And then it's just putting the components together. Okay. Take your time, see what you can come up with. If you stumble across anything and it's not quite working, then just let me know, email me through so that we can have a look. Go back through the video first, please. Make sure you've not missed something kind of obvious. But hopefully for some of you, that will give you a bit of a taste of getting your models up and running and working. It would be good if you can, loads of you that have got access to Unity, for all to have a go, even if you just find a model from anywhere and download it, but play with the scripting and play with the animator controller, because if we do need to show evidence of how you've developed your ideas and how you've developed some of the game project ideas, this could be a really good kind of way of doing it. If you've got a simple scene that has got a model in there that you or one of your group members have developed, and you can show that you've gone through and you've put this into action and it works and it runs the animations and it can do different commands when you call it, then that will be a really nice way of showing some of that work for the Unit 4 stuff that I talked about, and a little bit maybe of Unit 5 as well. Okay, so hopefully that's of help. That's a long old video. We're just under the hour, so take your time with this. Okay. All right, I will see you later.